Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Candace's Corner. I This season we are going to learn about the history of developmental disabilities in Missouri and creating system change. My name is Candace Cunningham. I am the host of the Candace's Corner. I am a person with lived experience in cerebral palsy and IDD. I work at the Institute for Human Development under advocacy efforts. I have my master's degree in clinical vocational rehab counseling. The research at the UC is a speaker for technical assistance center and for people with lived experience in developmental disabilities. Candace's Corner is a podcast where I get to interview people that are making a difference in the disability community field. And I get to learn from the people like everyone else who is listening to this podcast. So during this season, we are doing history of developmental disability in Missouri. This season, we are talking to people who made a significant difference in creating Missouri developmental disability in system and making a difference in the system, and from instituting care to individualized support. So I am happy today to interview Bonnie Simmons. He was the director of Missouri Division of Developmental Disabilities from 2006 to 2014. He worked to redesign and strengthening the developmental disability division and face many budget constraints. He also had been a consultant with many states on the Center for Medicare and Medicaid and U.S. Department of Justice and issues. Hi, Bonnie. How are you doing today?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being on today.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the invite.
What we'll learn about today is the way that Bonnie and other people create restructure developmental disability system. So, Bonnie, what brought you to Missouri?
I came to Missouri in 2005 to be the superintendent of Bell Fountain Rehabilitation Center in the St. Louis area. Um, there was some issues that the state was sued by the U.S. Department of Justice for the care and the well-being of people who were in Bell Fountain at that time. And I had had previous experience, as you just mentioned in my bio, of doing work with U.S. Department of Justice. And so I was recruited, for lack of a better term, to come to Missouri and assist with ameliorating all of the issues that the U.S. Department of Justice was claiming that the state was not providing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in that rehabilitation center.
So, um, so what action did you take with the Hibation Center?
Well, the first thing I did is have to do, an environmental scan to figure out, what was right, what was wrong, and read obviously the letter from the Department of Justice with the charges against the state, and then come up with a good work plan and bring in not just the staff who were very talented, who were working at the facility, but also some outside consultants to assist me with being able to rectify some of the situations that the Department of Justice pointed out that the state was deficient in.
So you basically mapped it out and what you needed to do and then took the action to do it.
That's correct. Yeah. And a lot of it was about abuse and neglect issues that, and what the basic premise of what Department of Justice uses is called CRIPA, CRIPA, which is the Civil Rights of Institutionalized Persons Act. And that's a lot of case law that they use from history with like Partlow State School in Alabama or Pennhurst up in Pennsylvania or Willowbrook up in New York. So those three are case law that they use, and then from there they use uh, the 14th Amendment, freedom of distress, for lack of a better term. Freedom of restraint, freedom of your ability to being able to do what you want to do as an individual and not be constrained or restrained, etc.
So, wow, that's a lot of history right there. Yeah. So when did you become the director of the Missouri Division?
So I came into St. Louis in about September of 2005, and I became the director in June of 2006. And as you said in the intro, I was there from 2006 until 2014.
And I know during that time you did a lot of awesome things.
Well,
So,
I had a lot of good staff to work with me to accomplish the vision that I had at that point.
yeah. What was the division of developmental like when you got to there?
There really wasn't. There was a lot of issues when I started because there was a lot of turnover with the director's position that I had assumed in June of 2006, and without having a steady hand and that consistency, it doesn't really give a good atmosphere and direction for the people. So, as an example, when I went out to the 11 regional offices initially to see, what was going on in the field when I first started, I said, "This is what we're going to do in the future." And they said, "Well, why would we listen to you? You're going to be gone in 6 months." And I understood that because there's a lot of turnover, and if you start going on one direction, the person leaves, then the next person coming in might have a different thought or different direction. So it's very confusing to the staff and can be, traumatic in them trying to accomplish. And obviously, everybody's gone into this field for wanting to do good things and making sure that if everybody has a good, wholesome life, etc. So, it becomes a very challenging.
And when you talk about the turnover with the staff and with the director, I I as an individual think about how that can affect the person that they serve. So it doesn't just affect the staff, you know. So that it's a lot of cycling.
Right.
Um, so I know when we talked a couple weeks ago, um, for the steps that you took to get where we are now, you went from crisis to prevention care,
Hmm.
um, for driving to self-directed, congregant care to integrate, individual support, compliance to outcome, and regional service deliver, delivery to county service delivery. Would you like to talk about those?
Sure. So to go from a crisis, that's a very reactive mode, right? So you're always in the posture of something went wrong, how do I fix it? And instead of being on the front end of how to create a better atmosphere and a better life for people, and to be able to prevent that on the front end so that people were not going into any type of crisis. That was the whole area that I wanted to get into. So that was, changing the culture of everybody who was in the system. When people were coming off the waiting list or moving from the rehabilitation centers into the community, their only choice was a provider. And I really wanted people to be self-directing their own services and taking more control of their own life as opposed to, and I use the example. So I said to one person one day when I was out in the community, so what do you go to church? And do you worship? And the person said, yeah. And I said, where do you go? And it says, where the staff wants to go. And not taking into account what the person's preferences were for any type of worship, etc. So, I had some concerns about that and what we were doing. So obviously we wanted to go from provider driven to more self-direction, and we grew it quite a bit. There was only like a little over 100 people, I think, when I got there, and it was probably about a good 12 or 1400 when I left. So, and that's the same with compliance. Compliance is, am I meeting the letter of the law, period, the end, not getting a good outcome for individuals and people, and listening to them so that people's lives are basically what they want, and taking, as you think back to when we were all in school of, and I know sometimes we learn things in school that we don't apply it, but I've always thought about Maslow's hierarchy and thinking about, the basic of the whole triangle that gets to the top about self-actualization. And that's what we really want. We want people to take control of their own lives and not have the providers or other people telling them what to do all of the time. And, if you do that, you'll get a good outcome, and, how we move forward with that. And then the last point that you raised was going from a regional service delivery system to a county. And one of the things that happened with that was looking at where we were uh, with case management as an example. So you had more and more people coming into the system every year. We had about 25,000 people when I was there initially. When I left, it was closer to 33,000 people, because we had created the Partnership for Hope waiver and some other things. But some of the things that I was concerned about is I knew I wasn't going to get any more state staff for doing case management, and the regions were doing case management at that time. So, the minute that more people are coming into the system and I have the same amount of staff, that means their caseloads are going up. So instead of being like a 1 to 60, you might be 1 to 120 or 1 to 150. That really doesn't meet the good needs of individuals, because when I have an issue, it's my issue, and I want to be able to have my case manager assist me with it and help me problem solve. And that wasn't happening. So we wanted to go from a regional to a uh, county, for lack of a better term, and we engaged with um, the Missouri Association of Communities of Developmental Disability Services, MACDDS. And they had about 36, 37 counties, I think, at that point in time initially, who were doing case management. And we engaged with them, and we had each regional director in the 11 regions deal with the counties, and each one had a Senate Bill 40. Not all of them. I think there was like 83 or 84 of the 115 counties, including the city of St. Louis, that basically uh, that's what we had, about 82 out of the 115. And so we chipped away and had discussion about how good it would be if you, as a county, would come in and start doing case management. And they agreed. So, when I left, I think there was somewhere around 80 almost counties, somewhere around there from the 17 that we started with. So it really took some traction. And what happened is when some counties would see that the county next door to them was doing it and how they could meet the needs of the citizens with intellectual and developmental disabilities within their counties, it was a good thing for them because with the Senate Bill 40, that's what their role and mission was. So it really, really took a lot of pressure off the regional offices. But more than that, it gave better outcomes for the individuals because the caseloads were that much lower for the county staff who worked doing case management. So I think that that's one of the hallmarks that I felt when I left Missouri, that it was I left it in pretty good hands because the counties were doing an excellent job.
Yeah, and I actually went to MacDDS last week, the conference, and saw all those county boards, and I'm like, wow, just learning from you and seeing how much it stuck, and grow.
Well, it helps when somebody's living in the county. I mean, if I had somebody in Kansas City as an example, and they might know maybe Kansas City because that's where they live as a state employee. But you get out to Liberty or Independence or some of those other places, they may not know the local community. And if you live out in Independence and you want to do something in your local community, it would be much better to have somebody who is more in tune with that to assist people navigating the community and try to get good outcomes for what they wanted to do.
Yeah. So, could you tell us about going from congregate care to individual supports?
Yeah. So we had a pretty good um, system for individual supports. Now, one was obviously self direction for more individual supports, but the other thing is going from congregate care with large group homes, 16 people or whatever, to downsize them and get into more supported living with two, three, four people. We had a good opportunity in St. Louis because uh, the providers, the providers statewide, didn't want to get into housing. They had to in the western part of the state, but in the eastern part of the state towards St. Louis, there was an advantage so that people could just concentrate on providing supports and services to the people who selected them as a provider agency. And so housing, you didn't want to be worrying about is the roof leaking or is there a problem with the plumbing or whatever. You wanted to be about the individual and the annual plan. So Rainbow Villages was in the St. Louis area, and what would happen is people would then, select the provider, and so they would select provider X, and then the family, individual, and a provider agency would contact a place like Rainbow Villages and say, "Gee, we have two or three people that live here. These are some of their needs," and they would interview Rainbow Villages and then have Rainbow Villages find a home for them in the area where they wanted to live, right? So if you were in St. Louis, you might want to live in Creek Cove, you may want to live in Florissant, you may want to live in Bell Fountain Neighbors or whatever. And so as opposed to, I want to live in St. Louis. Well, St. Louis has got a lot of subdivisions. So what we did is I worked with the Developmental Disabilities Council, and they actually created a not-for-profit 501c3. They did all the paperwork, and we created the Missouri Inclusive Housing, and that's how that started. And then Wayne Crawford was retiring from the state, and I said to him, "Wayne, how about taking this over? You are in the western part of the state. You were out towards Higginsville, etc. You know that part of the state." So that's how we built capacity so that when people were leaving Higginsville and Marshall, he
Mhm.
was instrumental in the housing piece for that.
That makes sense. It's funny. I just saw Wayne this past weekend, and So yeah, that's so awesome. So you had to connect with the. You have many. So you use your social capital from the people that you knew.
Yep.
That's cool. Could you talk about going from compliance to outcome?
Well, I think compliance is the basic, do my meaning the letter of the law, period, the end, as opposed to outcomes. And as I mentioned earlier, the outcome in my mind would be, somebody has hopes and dreams and it's in their annual plan. What do I want to do, etc. And then how are you getting that outcome and working with the individual? But it's more than just working with the individual, it's creating a culture with the providers and with people who were self-directing to know what that expectation is.
Yeah. We were talking about housing in Wayne and decorating the community housing, how you ask people from different part of the state to help you with that. Did you wanna explain any more?
I think it worked well because, when I mentioned earlier the U.S. Department of Justice coming into the state, one of the areas that I wanted to do is I put a no admissions policy into nobody going into the rehabilitation centers anymore. Whether it be down towards Nevada and in the western part of the southwestern part of the state, or whether it be towards Higginsville, Marshall, which is out towards Kansas City area, or St. Louis with St. Louis, Bell Fountain, and Developmental Disability Training Center. And then we had Sykeston and Poplar Bluff area. And so there was no admissions to any of that. The question then became to assist people in moving out into the community, housing could be a challenge. To select a provider who says, yep, I can hire staff. Or if somebody's self directing and says, yeah, I can hire my own staff and do this, then the question is, where do they live? And what does that housing look like? So I think that became, a pretty good of what we wanted to do. And I think housing was instrumental. I think that the other thing is, if you look at the elements that we did besides housing, we did employment first because we wanted everybody to have a job or at least have the opportunity to talk about a job instead of saying, oh, you know what, you need to go to the workshop. Well, people didn't want to go to the workshop, they wanted real jobs. And then we did self direction. And then we did basically supporting families, and that was instrumental because I was at a conference in 2011 with somebody from UMKC named Dr. Shelley Reynolds, and she did a presentation because that was the wing spread report. And I got back to Missouri from Philadelphia, and the first thing I did is call her boss and say, I want to buy some of her time, and because I saw the potential of supporting families. So it was good to work with Shelley and all that stuff. So um, the other thing is, besides self direction, we wanted to do something with people, and we brought in from North Carolina one of the university systems, the Project Stir, steps towards independence and responsibility, and trained a lot of people so that, when I heard people would say, I didn't know that I was being abused or whatever until I talked to a peer. And so it was more of a peer mentoring about all of that. So, I mean, there were a lot of different initiatives that we got going in the state.
Yeah, that's so cool. Um, those were all my questions that I had. Did Was there anything else that you would like to mention, Bonnie?
No, I think it was good with we did a couple of good things with the facilities. Um, Nevada basically had about, I think, a little over 100 people, maybe 110, 112 people. And we decided that we were going to close them because we didn't want to put because we wanted people in the community, but there were a lot of infrastructure problems with the facility itself. And everybody transitioned into the community. And we basically did, um, you as an individual living in Nevada, or I living in Nevada, had an opportunity to pick the staff who were the state employees with you to actually transition with you to your new home. And so, Wayne helped with that, with the housing, as well as a lot of the talented staff that were at Nevada at the time. And we transitioned and everybody into the community in that close. And then we had an area with Marshall and Higginsville being about 30 miles apart, which didn't make any sense. And when a lot of those people wanted to move to the community, so we actually closed Marshall and downsized Higginsville. So, I mean, it was a win-win for everybody, and I think it was really good. I think it sent a good message to everyone who were coming into the services or who were in services, in addition to growing self-direction, and that we were all about people and having a good outcome and having control and in your own voice.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that story and how it's still moving away from that. So, and I want to thank you for doing the hard work that you did back then because it's helped me as an individual, maybe not living in the congregate home, and as a professional, I'm learning from you to know this is my history and the people that I'm working with. So I appreciate you taking your time to do this interview with me.
Well, no, and thank you for inviting me. I appreciate
Yes.
it.
I want to thank Kyla too for thinking about it too.
Yep, yep, yep. She was. I'm glad she said yes when I approached her when she was in Ohio to move.
Me too. Yes. Well, I really do appreciate you taking your time out your morning, and
Okay.
I look forward to interviewing you again about other things. Yes.
I'd be happy to, Candace. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Have a great day.